I am going to be out of material already. I really do need to start asking you guys more questions, since most of my material recently has just been, hey, getting grades back. As you can see, I've got 2 more stacks left, and by the time I send more stuff out, I've just been slow. And then I get it all back at once. I used to in the past make kind of a good ebb and flow. A bit of that was kind of messed up by PSA because when I had made my submission back when I was doing that, when I originally started all this, I paid for, I think it was 60-day business turnaround time, and I got my cards back. This isn't a joke, this isn't exaggeration, 2 years later. So that kind of really screwed things up with our videos. This, as I've said, is probably like absolutely my last submission to PSA. The ones you're seeing me receive now. They have too many scandals. To include myself, I was scandaled. I had a card swap done to me. I have emails on all of it. The emails show that they did receive my Black Dot Charizard. I'll have to do a video about those emails. So these scandals aren't just happening to, just random people. This seems to be happening to everybody. As per mine, essentially what they did is they received my Black Dot Charizard and they swapped it out with a base set Charizard, and then they moved on. There are 2 theories, in my opinion. There are 2 logical theories. I will just get on them real short here, and then I'm gonna go through one of these stacks for this video. But here are my 2 theories that I think are very logical. And you have to understand, I have been and still am very high up in terms of high program production management, processing, and logistics. That's my day job outside of this. My other hobbies are high-end data and analytics, which is what brought me back to Pokemon, was just seeing the market analytics that made sense. And I've made videos about that in regards to, I've got an older video to where I guessed the 2025 Pokemon market to a T back in 2022, talking about each period of the market from 2022 to 2024 and up to 2025. So yeah, it's coming from someone who knows business production and operations. So here are my 2 likely scenarios that are occurring. The one that I believe more so than the other, but the second one is still very plausible, especially because of my email that I received back from PSA. So the first possibility, the first theory that's very plausible is you make these submissions. If you never submit anything to PSA, you have to pre-build your list. It's not like you just pay for 100 slots, however many slots, and you send the cards in, and then they look the cards up. It's very lazy for them. When you pay to send cards in, it's something like PSA graders. There's videos on this where people who work for PSA, they're expected to process like 50 cards an hour. So I really want you to think about that. You're paying right now at the lowest end $25 per card for submission. They're expected to do 50 cards per hour. PSA graders are only paid $20 per hour, and that's in the mid-range. This is from PSA workers that I've met at my drop-off submission, talking about how they're going to ask for a raise to 22 an hour after working with the company for 2 years as a grader. So yeah, if they're processing 50 cards an hour at the lowest end, $25 per card, it means they're bringing in for PSA $1,250. If I have that math correct. Yeah, $1,250 minus the $20 to the employee. So $1,230 minus the $30 in materials. So they're making $1,200 per hour per grader employee. They still have their analytical and support staff, but their support staff is so understaffed, I find that a minuscule amount to include against the data set. So for every grader they have, for every full set, which they're bringing in millions of cards per month, that data is there. And I think it's going to continue to go down though, because of the amount of scandals. Wow, I'm really deep diving in this video, I apologize. So basically this is my explanation on PSA, what's going on, and then we'll get to some grades. So we'll title the video appropriately, and I'll do a deeper video later. So you have to type in all that data before you even send in your cards. So you've typed it in, you hit send, and then you finally get your cards in the mail or a drop-off center. But here's the thing. The graders are receiving prior expected inventory logs. So they already know what sets are being assigned to them when they finally do arrive at PSA. So for example, let's say you or me were a PSA grader and we're currently doing our grades like we're supposed to at work, but we also get notified of what our future inventory is, and or we can look ahead of time what our future inventory is. So you have an idea of what your production log is going to be, and you can see the list. So let's say you have that information and you can see a week plus out, even probably further out, because when I submitted my cards, they didn't even get touched by PSA till after they had been there for 40 days, and then the timer starts. But let's say the PSA grader saw my cards that far out, 40 days out. That PSA grader, for example, Black Dot Charizard, sees that that's on the list of the cards they're going to receive. Either that PSA grader can bring in their own base set Charizard if they had one, or if they really wanted to, which since they've got so much time, they can buy a base set Charizard from eBay or anything like that, or from just going out to a vendor or Facebook Marketplace. There's tons of them, to be honest. Base set Charizard's rare in a sense, but Black Dot base set Charizard is super rare in comparison. And the only difference is one little ink dot. And when you're going to receive the cards, the only tidbit that's going to be a bit of an issue is before the cards get to you, they go through immediate inventory recipient scan. So my card, for example, my Black Dot that got sent in, it was image scanned before it got to my grader, showing the card with the Black Dot. Then that order of cards went to that grader. Now, what I believe more likely could have happened is the grader purposely, knowing when they were going to actually have to do the work with my cards, the hands-on work, knowing when the inventory and production of that day was going to be, purposely brought in a base set Charizard to swap out at some point without being under security footage. I don't know how tight PSA security footage is. I would hope it would be very tight in terms of what they had to deal with. PSA never sent me said footage. They just said they reviewed the footage and said no wrongdoing. However, they definitely 100% received my Black Dot Charizard. When we go through my emails, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. They said more likely that it was debris on the card, and the debris was blown off when they sealed the card. However, if you've seen any of my much earlier videos on this Black Dot Charizard before I submitted it, there's some videos of me rubbing over the Black Dot with my fingers several times, showing that there's no movement, it's not debris, it's 100% an ink Black Dot onto the Charizard. So now, what I'm getting at, that's theory one. Theory one is the employees themselves are doing the swaps. They have a viewpoint of what they're going to receive and when they're going to have to process it. And that could be the same thing with this lenticular deoxys that just occurred. The person could have saw that, oh, I'm going to be dealing with a PSA 10 lenticular deoxys, and said, well, hey, what's the next cheapest thing I can buy? And they saw that, oh, PSA 6 deoxys is only like a couple $100. I'll buy that off eBay, crack it open, pull it out, and then when it comes in, I'll just swap it out. And then we can just say damage has occurred. Now, that's theory one. And the reason why theory one it feels likely, because you would think such a large company that already makes so much money wouldn't go through so much trouble to make these extra couple hundreds of thousands of dollars. But here's the reason why theory two is believable. So theory two is stating that it's not the individual employees. Theory two is stating that it is the company as a whole is doing these swap outs. The lenticular solidifies this idea even more so. And the reason why the lenticular solidifies this idea even more so, oh, by the way, they didn't even want to give me any payout for my Black Dot. They at least were willing to give that guy a payout for his lenticular. So that's the part that solidifies, I think, is the company as a whole and not the employees. The company as a whole saying that they were going to pay out and then only pay out 20 grand for an already guaranteed 100% $45,000 card. If you don't know more about that, PSA was willing to pay 20 grand for the lenticular Deoxys, saying that was market value, even though PSA had just literally on their own site sold a PSA 10 Deoxys for 45 grand. So they're automatically already shorting this person 25 grand. But there are other sales between 50 and 60 grand for a lenticular Deoxys. So definitely they're trying to get away with basically profiting 25 to 40 grand. Because I do believe it was a swap out. I don't believe they accidentally damaged it for a whole bunch of reasons. But this more so is why I believe it's PSA as a whole, because if it had been an individual employee, PSA definitely would have punished that employee. They would have thrown him under the bus, and they would have been like, hey, we're not liable. This employee is. We're going to hold him liable. We're going to sue him on your behalf, and we're going to handle this blah, things like that. But none of that happened with this Deoxys, which leads me to believe that all of these swap outs are company-led swap outs. And it's kind of crazy because PSA already makes a ton of money. I mean, really consider if the lowest end fee they charge is $25 per card, and they're processing something like, I think the latest data was like 1 million to 2 million cards a month. That means PSA is making $25 to $50 million a month. And they gotta pay their graders, but I already went over you with that. Basically, and that's the lowest end of grading. They have plenty of other services that go through, and then on top of that, even if you do pay for the lowest service fee and your card becomes however much value, PSA still charges you for that higher end fee, even though they didn't send it in as fast, you didn't receive it back as fast as you would for those higher end service fees. So there's a whole bunch of issues with that. Again, I know I said I'd do a deeper video on it. I've already done 12 minutes on it. I will do a separate video on it, especially when we go over my emails. Without further ado, let us go ahead and get started on going through this stack. Got some Alakazams up. Okay. This isn't as big as a stack. I think this is like 16 cards. So up first is a base 2 Alakazam Holo. I guessed a 7 to 8 and got a 9. So I'm actually pretty pleased with that. Yeah, nothing I can really argue with there or say about it. I guess I'll just take that as is. Then next up is just a standard base set, and I guessed a 7. I got a 5. That raises some questions. I know you're probably saying, oh, but you got higher on the other and you're not raising questions. And here's my other issue with that, is that was a base set 2, this is a base set 1. And I've kind of noticed this pattern wishy-washy with my cards. I get higher grades on cards that don't really go up in value that much when the grades go up, but I'm getting lower on grades for cards that are affected more severely by the grade. So the only thing I could see, and maybe that's it, is it looks like possibly, it looks like there might be a bend in the corner. But here's the thing, because this is happening a lot with the cards I'm getting back from PSA. I don't remember these bends, and in my prior videos, I do a pretty good look over with all of my cards before I sent them in. I'm gonna review my video on this. This one's actually a decently annoyance. This is a base set Alakazam. It's actually like, it's worth some money, even just raw. Like, that much of a bend, and I didn't notice, and I've now had that on several of my cards. That raises some serious questions. Fuck, look, I'm just gonna say it, man. I think there's only one way we really do this. Because I'm tired of it. I'm going to review that video of my card before I had sent it in, this Alakazam. But with all the swaps and the whole purposely giving cards 9s just so that they'll pay a 9 price, you know, since the card is like 20 bucks as a 9 but 4,000 as a 10, I think we have to do a class action lawsuit against PSA. I mean, honestly, they're really large. I don't think individual lawsuits are going to cut it. I think it has to be a class action. They're already under federal investigation. Alright, so this non-holo base set Alakazam got an 8. I guessed an 8. That's perfectly fine. It's kind of strange that this got an 8, but that one got a 9, because this is definitely at least in as good shape, if not better than that 9. I honest to God think that they're doing that to whatever. I think we're going to have to do a class action lawsuit. All right, Fossil Hollow Aerodactyl, I guessed a 7. I got a 9. See, again, another card that really isn't affected that much by the increase of the grade unless you got it as a 10. And I'm surprised I said 7, to be honest. What was I thinking? But the price difference between a 7 and a 9 for this card is minuscule. So again, I'm wondering. Also, is that a dot error? I think it is. Oh, I see why it got a 9. But weirdly enough, sorry, I always have a hard time now with. That looks to me like a dot error. Oh, but that one's over the card glare. See, now that one is more likely some form of debris. It's definitely not a 10, but I'm just so surprised. Okay, and then General Kangaskhan Hollow, I guessed a 7. I got an 8. That's within 1 point of my guess. I don't know, it's kind of funny. Some readers take centering more seriously, some readers take whitening more seriously. I don't really care so much about centering. I just don't want damage to the card, which is essentially whitening and nicks and dings and bends. Up next is a Tyranitar XY 2015. I guessed an 8. I got an 8. Nothing really too spectacular to this card, in my opinion. People just really like Tyranitar. Oh, and you kind of can't see the list anymore, but we're here, Tyranitar 8. So you can see them telling the truth what I guessed. I guessed for Jungle Kangaskhan Hollow 7, Aerodactyl 7, that one got a 9, and then the non-hollow got an 8. The base set got a 5, and I'll have to take a look at that. Up next is a Mew Sun and Moon. I guess 7. I got 7. Now some of you are probably also kind of like, well, if you were already guessing 7s, why even bother sending the card in? I know quite a few of you are 10 hunters, and I'd like to feasibly be a 10 hunter. Honestly, this shouldn't have gotten a 7 based on the others. This should have gotten an 8 to 9 based on the others. At least an 8. And I just think being a 10 hunter, Hitmonchan, base set, I guessed a 7, and I got an 8. And here we go, by the way. This one, not XY. Base hit one Shan, just a 7, got an 8. I treat grades, in my opinion, and these sending in cards for grades, I treat sending cards in for grades a lot like opening sealed. I treat getting the grade as like, you know, like, oh, am I going to get a hit? But it's also important to kind of build this data set as to what should be a 7, what should be an 8, what should be a 10, things like that. All right, so Neo Beedrill Japanese, Neo Beedrill Hollow 8 Japanese, got an 8. Because now you really build a broader range of data. It's, in my opinion, fairly easy to guess what is a 10, especially once you like get a quick understanding and learn what a 10 is. The reason why, I got something on my, the reason why building the data set is so important is, let's say you just can't find any 10s, and that's the only thing you understand of value, when plenty of cards as 6, 7s, 8s, and 9s have value, and you don't know the difference between them because you never built the data set for them, and you're still just a 10 hunter, and you just can't, you don't know what to look for. All right, so this is the Yamabuki City Sabrina's Gaze non-hollow. I guess a 9, I got a 9. This is the band artwork because it's her giving you the middle finger, and or it looks like it. I think this one was a bit of an overreaction compared to some of the others. If I had to guess the reason why 9, it's the centering. And I guess that little itty bitty neck right there. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this little thing off the case. I'll do that later. So yeah, I mean, just that one, for example, picking up Sabrina's Gaze raw, and I think as a 10, it goes for like $250 right now. And someone's telling you that they have one raw, and you know, like they think it's going to be a 10, but they don't want to charge you a full 10 price, so they charge you $125. And you're like, man, oh yeah, that should 10. And then you pay $125 because you're like, I'm going to double my money minus the grader fee. And then it comes back to 9. I think as a 9, they go for like $80. It's been a while. Now you're out more money. I just think it's important to, again, build that data set. And then you have a negotiation tool. That's why it's also important to bring some graded cards with you whenever you're negotiating prices with anybody. So next up is a EX Mewtwo from 2015. I guessed an 8. No, I guessed 7 to 8, and I got an 8, so that's good. The good news is, and this actually, in my opinion, is a pretty cool Mewtwo card. You know, him up front right there charging his attack, his little Kamehameha. What the heck is that? Oh, that's just, okay, that is part of the design. You know what, now actually seeing this, always reminds me of Super Smash Bros, him doing this, because he does, you know, it's they should make some cards of Pokemon from the Smash Bros series. Just a small set, like a pop series size set, because there's only so many Pokemon in Smash Bros, and that'd be a cool set. Yeah, there's some damage there. I mean, it being Mewtwo still holds value, so that's always nice. Scissor. So we got a Scissor, guessed an 8, got an 8. Seeing Scissor when Scissor came out on TV was pretty dope, because you already thought Scyther was dope, and you got something that, like, you know, is the other version of Scyther. Now this one I think I'm a little disappointed with. 2019, no, I guess 8 to 9. Detective Pikachu Charizard, 8 to 9, I got a 9. Yeah, I see some silvering up top. And some stuff mess with the corners. Unfortunate. Not too far off from a 10. And I actually thought this movie was pretty decent. Ryan Reynolds definitely helped. After Detective Pikachu, we have a non-holo Dark Charizard. Just 6 to 7. I got an 8. Again, I don't know if it's part of their thing, but it really seems like they're always upping me at least 1 point for cards where it really doesn't change the value. And they're always dinging me down 1 point for the cards that it would. And that's annoying for a lot of reasons. It's like they're trying to win you over, but they're trying to make sure you don't get ahead with anything. Now, this was a cool card, and I don't think there was a stamp. I don't think there was a label for it. Now, you already see it. It's just a Machamp. You're like, oh, why is that so cool? Well, it is a base Machamp. I guessed a 6. I got an 8, but that's not what makes it cool. What makes it cool is it is a light stamp Machamp. So you can see that its first edition symbol is just kind of barely on there. It's like a faded light press. So that is what makes this cool, and it's also cool that they gave me an 8 instead of a 6, which again kind of shows that I'm pretty harsh on my own grades. I must have saw something. I think it was that strong corner ding and the strong left corner ding. I'm actually surprised this got an 8. Now this one, I think it actually did add some value by them going from a 6 to an 8. So I don't know. I just wish it was more consistent, to be honest. And then last is another Charizard. This is a Power Keepers Charizard. I guessed a 6 to... No, not that one. That's Power Keepers. This is Legendary Treasure. I guess 7 to 8, and I got a 9. If I had to guess, it was like centering. Yeah, centering's not perfect. And maybe just the ittiest bittiest of corner stuff, but that's pretty decent. I'm getting that in a 9 versus 7 to 8. I don't know. But I will have to do a deeper video in regards to a class action lawsuit against PSA.